Around 50 soldiers have been killed in an attack on a military base in northern Burkina Faso. The assault happened on Monday in the town of Dago in Boussa province. Local sources say around 100 militants overran the base, killing troops before setting it on fire and looting supplies. The group Jamaat Nasser al-Islam wal Muslimin is suspected to be behind the attack, though this hasn't been officially confirmed. Burkina Faso has seen a sharp rise in militant violence, with several armed groups active across the north and east of the country. The former Prime Minister of Mali has been charged with undermining the state after a social media post expressing support for jailed opposition figures. Moussa Mara, who led the government for 9 months in 2014, was detained and questioned by Mali's cybercrime unit over comments he made on X, formerly Twitter, pledging solidarity with what he called prisoners of conscience. The military junta, which seized power in a series of coups between 2020 and 2021, accuses Mara of inciting public disorder and opposing legitimate authority. He is expected to stand trial on 29 September. In his post, Mara said his visits were to ensure the flames of hope never fades in those detained. The prosecutor claims those remarks amount to an offense under national law. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have agreed on terms of economic cooperation in several sectors as the two countries move towards delivering on a peace deal signed in June. According to the U.S. State Department, which brokered the deal, the tenets agreed on Friday summarize the regional economic integration framework, which includes elements of cooperation on energy, infrastructure, mineral supply chains, national parks, and public health. In a statement, Rwanda and the DRC affirmed that each country has full sovereign control over the exploitation, processing, and export of its natural resources, and recognize the importance of developing mineral processing and transformation capacity within each country. South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile is facing mounting scrutiny after it emerged his wife accepted a diamond from a jailed gem dealer, a gift he failed to declare. The diamond was allegedly given by Louis Liebenberg, a gemstone trader currently serving time for theft and money laundering. Mashatile claims he was unaware of the gift's origin until later and says it was turned over to authorities once the link was discovered. Parliament's Ethics Committee fined the Deputy President 10,000 rand for not disclosing the gift. President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has recently taken action against other officials accused of misconduct, said Mashatile would need to answer for his role. Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies say they've uncovered a large-scale bribery scandal involving the purchase of military drones and electronic warfare systems. A sitting MP, local government heads, and members of the National Guard have been arrested, accused of inflating state contracts by up to 30%. President Volodymyr Zelensky posted on X, calling it a zero-tolerant moment for corruption in Ukraine. The arrests come just days after Zelensky moved to restore the independence of Ukraine's anti-corruption bodies following nationwide protest against a bill that would have weakened their powers. The move was welcomed by both Ukraine's intelligence chief and EU allies, with Kyiv hoping to keep its EU membership bid on track.
The Palestinian people have endured terrible suffering.
The UK will formally recognize the state of Palestine in September unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire and commits to its two-state solution. The decision represents a major change in the UK's foreign policy and follows increasing pressure on Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government over the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Starmer told reporters the situation on the ground had become increasingly intolerable and that now is the moment to act. The Prime Minister recalled his cabinet from their summer break to approve the UK's Middle East roadmap after holding talks with US President Donald Trump in Scotland. While Trump said the issue was not discussed, he added he did not mind the UK taking a position even if he would not. Under the UK-led 8-point plan, Israel must meet a series of conditions including halting the fighting in Gaza, ending annexation efforts in the West Bank, and committing to long-term peace talks or face formal UK recognition of a Palestinian state ahead of the UN General Assembly. Israel has strongly condemned the announcement. Several Arab and Muslim nations have for the first time jointly called on Hamas to disarm and step down from power in Gaza. A statement backed by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Arab League, the European Union, and 17 other countries was signed at a UN conference in New York co-hosted by Saudi Arabia and France. The declaration urges Hamas to relinquish control to the Palestinian Authority with international support and oversight. It also condemns the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel and suggests deploying a UN-led stabilization mission in Gaza. The Taliban has condemned what it calls the mass and unjust expulsion of Afghan nationals from neighboring countries. It also warned that the move amounts to a serious breach of international and Islamic principles. Iran and Pakistan, both hosting large Afghan populations, have been rounding up undocumented foreigners in recent months, threatening deportation or arrest if they fail to leave. But despite denials of targeted action, officials in Kabul say the figures tell a different story. At a press conference on Wednesday, Abdul Rahman Rashid, the Taliban's deputy minister for refugees, said nearly 1.8 million Afghans have been sent back from Iran in just 3 months. Over 184,000 Afghans have been returned from Pakistan this year alone. The scale Afghan officials say is unprecedented in the country's history. Myanmar's military government has ended a state of emergency that's been in place since it seized power in 2021. The junta Qatar says it is restructuring its administration ahead of elections planned for later this year despite widespread conflict and opposition. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing will now act as president, giving him even greater control ahead of the polls. The military-backed National Defense and Security Council is taking over key functions, and a new body has been set up to monitor the vote. But critics warn the elections will be neither free nor fair. One of the strongest earthquakes ever recorded has struck off Russia's far east, triggering tsunami warnings across the Pacific. The magnitude 8.8 quake hit early Wednesday near the Kamchatka Peninsula, a sparsely populated region in Russia. The tremor set off widespread evacuations from Japan to Hawaii and along parts of the US and South American coastlines. In Japan, at least one person has died and others were injured or fell ill during evacuations. In Russia, several people were hurt fleeing buildings, including a hospital patient who jumped from a window. Some structural damage has been reported, including to a kindergarten in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. Tsunami waves were recorded in parts of Japan, Hawaii, California, and as far south as Chile and Peru, but so far there have been no reports of major coastal damage. Cambodia and Thailand have agreed to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire following peace talks brokered in the region. At least 33 people have been killed and thousands displaced since fighting flared on July 24, the latest spike in violence after months of mounting border tensions. The breakthrough came after US President Donald Trump urged both nations to halt hostilities, making a ceasefire a precondition for their trade talks with Washington. In the hours after the truce was declared, Cambodia called for the urgent release of 20 of its soldiers detained by Thai forces. Phnom Penh says the troops were captured after crossing into Thai-held territory, a move Bangkok describes as a breach of the post-ceasefire arrangements. The Thai military, however, insists the detainees will be returned once unspecified legal procedures are complete.
So what is your new deadline? What can we expect?
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today.
US President Donald Trump has given Russia a fresh deadline to show progress in ending its war in Ukraine or face what he describes as consequences. Speaking during a visit to Scotland, Trump told reporters he was setting a new deadline of 10 to 12 days for Moscow to act, cutting short an earlier 50-day timeline. The warning comes amid continued frustration in Washington over what he called a lack of movement from Russian President Vladimir Putin. But on social media, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev accused Trump of playing a game of ultimatums, warning it could push the US closer to direct conflict with Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed Trump's stance, calling it particularly significant and urging tougher sanctions on Moscow as a path to peace. The tension between Washington and Moscow is once again on the boil, this time over nuclear submarines. US President Donald Trump says he has ordered 2 of the country's nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions in a direct response to what he calls highly provocative comments from former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Posting on his social media, Trump said the move was a precaution just in case. He did not specify where the submarines were headed, but made it clear the remarks from Medvedev, now deputy chair of Russia's Security Council, crossed the line. While the Kremlin has not officially responded, markets in Moscow dropped sharply after Trump's announcement.
I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election. And there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her.
US President Donald Trump has fired the country's top labor statistics official just hours after new figures showed jobs growth had slowed. The White House confirmed the dismissal of Erica McEnteffer, the Commissioner for Labor Statistics, amid claims by Trump that she had faked employment data in the run-up to last year's election, a move he says sought to helping Kamala Harris win. In a post on Truth Social, the president accused McEnteffer of rigging Friday's jobs report to make him and the Republican Party look bad. No evidence was provided to support those claims. Instead, he insisted the US economy was booming and ordered her removal, adding she would be replaced by someone more competent and qualified. But the data tells a different story. July's employment numbers missed expectations and figures for May and June were revised sharply downwards, fueling concerns about the labor market since Trump returned to office. Colombian former President Alvaro Uribe has been sentenced to 12 years of house arrest for witness tampering and a fraud charge. The 73-year-old is the first former president in the country's history to be convicted of a crime. He has also been barred from public office and fined $578,000. Uribe, who maintains his innocence, told a judge in Bogota he would appeal against his conviction. He said the case was meant to destroy a voice for the democratic opposition. The former president was convicted of 2 charges on Monday in a witness tampering case that has run for around 13 years. He was president from 2002 to 2010 and remains popular in Colombia despite being accused of working with right-wing paramilitaries to destroy leftist rebel groups. El Salvador has voted to abolish presidential term limits, paving the way for President Nayib Bukele to run for office an unlimited number of times. The constitutional reform passed late Wednesday by lawmakers loyal to Bukele also extends presidential terms from 5 to 6 years and brings the next general election forward to 2027. Bukele, who has led the Central American nation since 2019, remains popular for his tough stance on gang violence. Just 3 lawmakers opposed the changes, which critics say will cement one-party rule. The president previously secured a second term despite constitutional limits after a court, stacked with his allies, ruled it was his right to run again.